On KIR-3, no one made eye contact in a mist. The acid haze that draped the world wasn't just toxic, it was intimate, creeping in like a second skin, even thoughts. It clung to you like guilt, and in a place like this there was plenty of that to go around. The towers of the southern industrial district rose like rusted bones from the cracked concrete. They groaned under the weight of machinery that never slept. Lights flickered half-heartedly through grime-streaked panels, casting cold blue glows that bled into the fog. Everything here was old, everything here was dying, except the system. The system never stopped. Eli Cavern moved through it like a ghost. His boots clanged softly on the metal walkway, a lonely rhythm swallowed quickly by the omnipresent hum of extraction engines above. Drones zipped between scaffoldings, scanning, reporting, watching cameras nested in the corners like silent vultures. No one looked up anymore, no one wanted to be seen. He was returning from an overtime repair, yet another coolant regulator on subline 32 had failed. It didn't matter, nothing ever changed. Workers patched holes, replaced rot, and kept the decay from collapsing too quickly. That was their job: keep the dead machine breathing, keep the wheels turning, and keep your head down. Eli wasn't exceptional, a systems technician, third grade. He was one of thousands, nameless, faceless, replaceable, and he preferred that way. Visibility invited questions, questions invited attention, and attention on KIR-3 got people disappeared. He was halfway across the freight corridor, his breath misting through his rebreather, when he saw her. At first, he thought it was trash, a bundle of cloth tossed on the steps of the cargo bay's south exit, like someone had abandoned a sack of dirty laundry. But something was wrong with the shape too, still, too human. He stopped. The form shifted, a shudder ran through it, small and pitiful. Then a hand moved, thin, shaking, curling inward as if it no longer believed in reaching out. She was young, barely more than a girl. Her skin, beneath the filth, was an eerie green, a hue not native to any documented species that lived or worked in the city sectors. Her long black hair clung to her face in damp strands, and her cheeks were hollow and sharp. Her lips were cracked, and her breath came in short, painful gasps. But it was her eyes that broke him, large, luminous violet like a bruise, and completely, utterly empty. Not empty with death or starvation. He'd seen hunger before on worker transports in the slums outside the dome sectors, but this wasn't just hunger. This was a slow execution by neglect, a death not by violence, but by a world that simply didn't care. She was crying, no sound, just tears slipping silently down her cheeks, cutting pale trails through the grime. Something tightened in his chest, he hadn't felt that in years. Not since, no. He pushed the memory away. He looked around, no movement, just the dull groan of machinery, no guards, no patrols. Yet the security tower scanner was pointed toward the east wall, at least for now. Still, cameras saw everything, drones recorded everything. He should have walked away, just another poor soul, not his responsibility, but he didn't. Eli moved quickly, pulling his coat off. The lining was warm, triple-layered. He draped it around her shoulders, and she flinched but didn't resist, her hands were ice. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "Can you walk?" She looked up at him, and for a heartbeat he thought she might try to speak, but instead she simply stared, defeated, waiting to be left again. He sighed, reached down, and lifted her into his arms. She weighed nothing, a handful of bones wrapped in trembling skin. She didn't cry out, she just let her head fall against his shoulder, her breath rasping against his neck. He moved fast, taking the back paths, service tunnels under the old piping grid, out of sight of surface monitors. The reek of oil and chemical exhaust filled the air. He knew this route, knew where the blind spots were. With every step, he expected a siren, a red flash, an alarm, but the city kept humming, oblivious. His unit was tucked behind a scrap recycler on level D12, just another worker pod with gray walls, one cot, one heater, and one recycled air system that worked like an old man in winter. He laid her gently on the cot and pulled a thermal blanket over her. She didn't move, she just closed her eyes and exhaled slowly, broken like a machine running out of power. He stared at her for a long time, then locked the door, turned off the panel light, and sank to the floor. What the hell was I doing, he wondered. This wasn't some bleeding heart moment, he wasn't a hero. He'd lived through enough to know better. You helped someone on KIR3. You paid for it. But he couldn't walk away, not after that look, not after the soundless way she cried, not after seeing her in those eyes. The next day passed in shadows. He stayed home, claiming a tech fatigue protocol, no one questioned it. He had credits saved, and the supervisors were too overworked to care. She didn't wake until the second evening. He was sitting at a small table, working on a damaged sensor coil, when she stirred, a quiet rustle. He turned, she sat up slowly, his coat still wrapped around her like armor. Her gaze flitted across the room, she looked like she might bolt. It's all right, Eli said softly. You're safe here. She blinked, watched him for a long moment, then, in a barely audible voice, she spoke, Sarah. He set the coil down. That your name? A small nod, and he smiled, it felt foreign on his face. I'm Eli. Silence followed, but it was less tense now. He stood, poured a cup of warm synth broth, and held it out. She stared at it as if it might vanish, then took it with both hands. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't spill a drop. When she finished, she pulled her knees to her chest and rested her chin on them. Her eyes never left his. You got people? He asked. She shook her head. He hesitated. Are you running from something? There was no answer, but the darkening of her eyes said enough. He didn't press, he didn't need to. Whatever had brought her here had nearly killed her. She didn't need more questions, just time. That night, she fell asleep near the heater, curled up like a child. Eli stayed up, pretending to work but really just watching her chest rise and fall. She was alive, that meant something. When he finally lay down, he felt different, not lighter, not better, but less numb. He didn't know who she was or why she'd ended up half dead in the cargo bay. He didn't know what danger might follow her or what rules he'd just broken, but he knew one thing for certain, he couldn't go back. Something had shifted inside him. He wasn't just a technician anymore, he was a man who'd saved a life, and he wasn't going to let the world take it from him, not again. Morning on KIR3 came without sunrise. The sky was a dull, acidic gray, the same color it had been for years. There was no weather here, just a constant drift of chemical mist and a low mechanical hum that never slept. The world outside Eli's unit remained indifferent, as always, but inside, something fragile was beginning to shift. He sat on the edge of his workbench, sipping from a dented metal cup. The synthetic coffee tasted like copper, but it was hot, and that was enough. Across the room, Sarah slept curled beneath his coat, small and still. Her breathing had steadied overnight, but it was shallow, as if her lungs hadn't quite decided if they wanted to keep trying. Eli didn't know what to expect when she woke, fear, panic, silence. He wasn't sure what scared him more, that she might lash out or that she wouldn't speak at all. But when her eyes opened, slow and blinking against the stale light, she didn't run. She looked at him, he nodded once. Morning. Sarah said nothing more than that, just blinking and pulling her coat tighter around herself. In the dim light, she looked a little cleaner, if only slightly. The grime still clung to her skin like a second layer, and her tangled hair framed her face in thick, oily strands, but her eyes were clearer now, less hollow. There was life in them again. You got people? He asked. She hesitated, then gave the slightest nod. Eli got up and moved toward the cupboard, pulling out a food pack and a canister of heat-activated broth. It wasn't much, just powdered nutrients and chemically flavored starch, but it was all he had. He poured the mixture into a tin bowl and set it in the warmer as the machine hummed softly. Glancing over his shoulder, he saw that she was now sitting up, legs folded beneath her, watching him carefully. He brought the bowl to her and crouched, holding it out with both hands. "It's not fancy, but it'll help," he said. She reached slowly, her fingers brushing his as she took it. Her skin was cold but no longer clammy. She held the bowl close and, for a moment, simply inhaled the steam, then ate small, cautious bites, as if afraid it might be taken away. Eli said nothing, just watched her, careful not to stare too long. The way her shoulders relaxed after every swallow told him enough. She hadn't eaten in days, maybe longer. When the bowl was empty, she lowered it gently to the floor, her eyes flicking to his again in uncertainty. He offered a small smile, "You're welcome." She didn't smile back, but she didn't look away either. After a pause, he stood and scratched at the back of his neck. "There's a shower unit in the back, it's not much, but it works." Sarah tilted her head, confused. He gestured toward the short hallway near the sleeping alcove. "You could clean up if you want. Warm water, I'll find you something clean to wear." Still, she hesitated. He could see it in her distrust, the instinct to protect herself, the residue of a life that had offered little room for safety. "You don't have to," he added quickly, "I just figured you might feel better." For a long moment nothing happened, then slowly she stood. Her coat slipped from her shoulders, and he caught a glimpse of the layers beneath, cloth barely holding together, stained and worn. Her green skin was marked by thin, healed scars along her arms, not new, not fresh, the kind of damage that came from long suffering, not violence, but neglect more than cruelty. Eli turned away and stepped into the hallway, giving her space. "There's soap in the panel, water controls on the right. I'll be out here if you need anything," he said as the door hissed shut behind her. He sat down again, fidgeting with the tools on his bench. His fingers found a twisted coil, but his thoughts were not on repairs, they were with her. Sarah, who was she? Where had she come from? Why had she been alone, collapsed on cold steel as if she'd fallen out of existence? He didn't ask, not yet. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was careful, like glass stretched too thin. The water ran for a long time before she emerged, steam billowed into the room. Her hair was wet, but it fell smoother now, long and black like strands of obsidian. Her skin was clean, revealing a soft glow that shimmered faintly beneath the green, like starlight seen through clouds. She wore one of his old shirts, too large but warm, hanging off her shoulders with sleeves rolled to her elbows. She had found a pair of utility pants he'd set aside and pulled the drawstring tight at the waist. She looked less fragile, still thin, still weary, but something had changed. He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Feel better," she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He picked up a packet from the table and held it out. "Tea. Sort of tastes like moss, but it's warm." She took it, their fingers brushing again, her hands were steadier now. They sat in silence for a while, Sarah on the edge of the cot, Eli at his workbench pretending to tinker. Then she spoke, her voice soft and unpracticed. "Why?" he asked, looking up. "Why did you help me?" she inquired. He didn't answer right away, the question had lingered in his mind all night. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I guess I saw someone who needed help." She studied him, her gaze wasn't sharp, but it was heavy. Eli sighed. "Years ago, I watched someone die, someone close, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't do anything. I told myself if it ever happened again, I'd be different." He looked away. "So maybe this was me trying." Sarah said no more, yet she didn't need to. That night, she didn't sleep by the heater, she lay down on the cot. When he turned off the light, she reached for his hand beneath the blanket, just lightly, just once. He let her hold it, and for the first time in years, he didn't dream about the boy he couldn't save. Instead, he dreamed of a girl with starry skin and violet eyes who cried without sound, and this time he didn't look away. The third morning arrived with a faint tremor. It came not from the earth, KIR3 didn't quake anymore, but from the weight of a world stretching just a little too thin, as if something buried beneath the steel crust had finally begun to shift. Eli woke to the sound of boiling water and the gentle rattle of a spoon against metal, a sound that didn't belong in his life, not in this place, not in this century. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming, but when he opened his eyes, the cot was empty. Sarah stood in front of the heating unit, steam rising from a small tin cup. She wore the same oversized shirt and utility pants, rolled and tied at her waist, her long black hair hung damp and wild down her back, strands clinging to the nape of her neck. The skin of her arms caught the weak morning light, casting a faint green shimmer that was almost too delicate for this world. She turned as he sat up, her expression unreadable, then, without a word, walked over and offered him the cup. He blinked. "You made tea?" She gave a slow nod, her gaze drifting toward the heater again. Eli accepted the cup, careful not to let their fingers brush. The cup was warm, the taste sharp and bitter, dried root boiled just long enough to be tolerable, but it was perfect. "I didn't know we had tea," he murmured to himself. Her voice came soft, nearly a whisper, as she added, "Found it back off the cabinet." He looked at her, really looked. There was color in her face now, her shoulders no longer sagged with exhaustion. Something in her had started to return, piece by piece. "You're feeling better," he said. She nodded slightly, that was all. No elaborate explanations, no backstory, just enough to say she wasn't dying anymore, and somehow, in that moment, it was enough. They shared a quiet breakfast, dry ration bread, rehydrated fruit, another round of root tea. Conversation was still minimal, but the silence between them had shifted. It wasn't filled with fear or hesitation anymore, it was comfortable, like two people quietly learning how to breathe in the same rhythm. Afterward, Eli returned to his workbench. The coil from yesterday still sat half open, he didn't really need it anymore. It had been for a side job, something he'd taken to earn extra credits for a non-existent future, but the routine helped. Sarah wandered through the small space. She didn't ask questions or pry, she simply touched things gently, a screwdriver, a spool of wire, a rusted piece of a pressure valve, examining them as if they were relics rather than tools. "You know what that is?" he asked when she paused over a strip power cell. She looked at him with a mixture of amusement and offense. "Recharge buffer," she said. "But yours is cracked, it won't hold." Eli blinked. "Yeah, that's right. I can fix it." It wasn't a question, and she didn't wait for permission. She took the cell, found a cutter from the toolkit, and started working. He watched her, trying not to seem too surprised. Her hands moved with precision, slow, steady, sure. Her fingers were long and delicate but calloused in places only someone who'd worked with real systems would have. She didn't need to guess, she knew. "You've done this before," he said. "Yes," she replied simply. Still, it sparked something in him, curiosity, admiration, perhaps even something deeper, something he wasn't ready to name yet. When she finished, she handed the cell back without ceremony. "Try now." He connected it to the panel and flipped the switch. The light blinked green. Eli smiled. "That's the first thing in this room that's worked right in a week." Sarah didn't smile back, but her eyes flickered with satisfaction. Hours passed, the day outside stretched on, indistinguishable from the one before, but inside, things were different. Sarah stayed close, not in a way that invaded his space, but near enough to feel real, as if she were choosing to be here now rather than just surviving in the warmth. She found a bit of charred wire and started sketching shapes on scraps of packaging, stars, mostly spirals and dots connected by imaginary lines, some of which he recognized from old constellation maps, others he did not. "Where are these from?" he asked. She hesitated. "Home," she finally said, and then paused. "What was it like?" he prompted softly. "Quiet, cold sky. Everything moved slow. We listened to each other." The words lingered in the air. He didn't press her further, it was all she had shared. Later that night, as he powered down the console, he caught her watching him. "What?" he asked gently. She tilted her head. "You don't ask many questions," she said. He shrugged. "And you don't offer many answers." After a long pause, he asked, "Why not?" "Because I don't want to push you away," she replied. That made her go quiet again, not in a way that closed doors, but in a way that said, "I'm thinking about that." They sat together in the low glow of the heater. Sarah rested her back against the wall, her knees drawn up, hands folded in her lap. She looked tired but not weak. Then, out of nowhere, her voice broke the quiet. "People don't do that, not here," she said. Eli raised a brow. "Do what?" "Wait." He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. Eventually, she spoke again. "My kind feels too much, that's what they say. They called it a defect. They said we think with the wrong parts of ourselves," Eli said, turning to her. "They left you behind?" Her jaw tensed. "I was inconvenient." It made him want to break something, not for her, not to impress her, but because the idea that someone like her had been discarded like spare parts made something in his chest burn. "You're not a defect," he said. "You're just real, more real than anyone I've met in a long time." Sarah didn't respond, but her gaze softened just a little. She reached forward, her fingers barely grazing his wrist, not an accident, not a mistake, and Eli didn't pull away. They stayed like that for a long time, connected by silence, by understanding, by the subtle gravity that pulled two lost souls together. Outside, the mist thickened, curling against the windows as if it knew something had changed, because it had. The heater clicked once, then again, as it struggled to maintain warmth against the creeping cold that lived inside the walls. KIR-3 didn't get colder, not in any technical sense, for temperature was controlled, regulated, processed, but somehow the cold still found its way in. It was the kind of cold that sank into bones, settled behind eyes, and whispered truths best left buried. Eli woke to that precise kind of silence, not the absence of sound, but the quiet that made you feel as if the world were waiting to inhale. The cot was empty. He sat up quickly, heart thudding, the air in the room felt wrong, too still, too heavy. He scanned the shadows. Sarah lay on the floor, curled tightly near the far wall, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped around her head. Her whole body trembled, not from cold, but from something far deeper. Her breath came in short, choked gasps. Before he even realized it, Eli was beside her. "Sarah," he whispered. "Hey, you're safe. You're here. It's okay." She didn't respond, her eyes were open but unfocused. She didn't see him. He reached out slowly, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. She flinched hard, her whole frame recoiling as if burned. He froze, then softened his touch. "It's Eli, just me. You're not gone, you're here." She blinked once, twice, and finally her eyes met his. Recognition flickered, a breath caught, and she collapsed against him, not like someone seeking comfort, but like someone whose body had finally let go after holding too much for too long. Her forehead pressed to his chest, her hands fisting into his shirt, and gradually, her tremors slowed, bit by bit, breath by breath. Eli said nothing. He didn't ask or prod, he simply held her steady and warm, letting her come back to herself. It took a long time. When she finally pulled away, her face was pale and damp, her violet eyes ringed with exhaustion. She didn't speak immediately. "Do you want water?" he asked gently. She nodded. He helped her sit up, then stood to fetch a canister. Carefully, he poured water into a small ceramic cup, the one with the chipped rim she always chose. She took it with both hands and drank slowly, almost reverently. Then she set the cup down, looked at him, and said something he hadn't expected to hear. "I'll tell you." Eli didn't move, he waited. Sarah stared at the wall, her fingers tracing invisible patterns into the blanket draped over her legs. I was born on a moon called Navara, she said. We weren't many, maybe a few thousand, scattered across the mountains. We didn't build much, just what we needed: stone shelters, sky mirrors, root gardens. Our world was small but quiet, beautiful. Her voice was steady now, low and calm like a stream flowing through rocks. We listened mostly, that's what we did, to the sky, to the wind, to each other. Silence wasn't empty where I came from, it was sacred. We could hear things in it, truths, emotions, things people didn't know how to say out loud. She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. They didn't like that, the ones who came later, the off-worlders, the corporates. They started digging, building towers, melting the ground with metal. They said they'd leave us be, that we were culturally protected. They lied. Eli clenched his jaw. My people didn't fight. We didn't know how. We tried to adapt, we let them build, let them pave over our fields. We offered help, shared what we knew. But some of us started to change. She looked down at her hands, turning them slowly as if surprised they were still there. I was young, too young to understand, but I felt everything, all the emotions around me, fear, anger, grief. They poured into me as if my skin had no walls. Eli's brow furrowed. You mean empathic? More than that, she said softly. I could feel what others refused to, things they buried. I absorb them, I carry them. She exhaled long and slow. They said I was too sensitive, that I made people uncomfortable, that I destabilized group harmony, so they sent me away, not far, just to a distant facility, one of the research centers the corporations ran. They said it was for my own safety. But I know what exile feels like, even when they use soft words. His heart ached. And KIR3, I escaped, she continued. I stole a service passcode hidden in a freight crate. I didn't even know where it was going, I just wanted to be gone. I thought maybe if I was far enough away, I could stop feeling everyone else. She looked up at him. But you don't stop, you just become gone. He didn't realize.